Sea of Red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, the Calgary Flames come off a perfect homestand as I'm Dan alongside Matt again. And Matt, I thought they'd do pretty well this week. I didn't think they'd do this well.
Well, everybody was talking about being in the five at the start of the season, but, everybody penciled bottom five.
They didn't say which five.
Yep, and they worked their way into the top five for about an hour or two, and are now in sixth, in tied with, I cannot remember who, but...
and you're talking about top five teams in the league.
Yes, not just in our division, which even that would have been a stretch, I think, for a lot of people at the start of the year. But, we're tied in sixth with Washington, at only a point behind Vegas and 2 behind Carolina for the top 4 in the entire league. It's kind of ridiculous where the Flames are at right now.
We'll talk about this week, but before we do, I thought there's a simple phrase I came up with that we can use to sum up the Flames season. The goalies will keep them in it, and Kirkland will win it.
Yep.
I think that's the Flames season so far.
That's a signature tagline, and his shootout goals are becoming signature moments.
Maybe we'll get some shirts made. We've talked about having a merch store. Maybe we'll get a shirt made that says that.
Yep.
Let's talk about this week. So the Calgary Flames had both New York teams come to town on the first game of the week was the Islanders coming to town on November 19th, and Dustin Wolf was in net, made 28 saves. The Flames rallied for a 2-1 shootout win against the Islanders. Big game, I think, coming off a less than stellar week last week. They did get the win against Nashville, but the loss against the Canucks before that. So good game here. What did you think of this one?
I thought that the Flames played a little bit sloppy at times, and I thought the Islanders, frankly, played a little sloppy.
I was going to say, I think both teams were kind of sloppy.
Like the fact that this game went to overtime and then a shootout did not really surprise me based off of how each of the teams played. Neither team, I thought, generated a ton of high-quality scoring chances. And between the two, Varlamov was there, Wolf was there anytime that there were any high-quality chances, and it went to the shootout, and the Flames collected the win.
We had Andrei Kuzmenko get the shootout winner in this. Last week, our friend Kevin Olenek was on the show with us, said we should put him on waivers. So I'm so glad he's not on waivers because he was useful this week.
Yes. So. Well, and Kuzi is getting a lot better as each game is going forward. And, he's one of those players that, like, when he is not skating well and, the puck's just not bouncing for him, it's like, oh my God, is this guy even an NHL player? And so, to back up Kevin a little bit, the idea of placing him on waivers, it does make sense from a certain standpoint due to the fact that when he's bad, he's really bad. But like over the last, 8 or 10 games, he's been trending in the right direction, and he's starting to turn the corner and contribute positively, which getting relied on to be the second shooter in the shootout and deking the goalie out as hard as he did for the game-winning goal, I think, is showing that things are trending in the right direction for him.
Flames are trending in the right direction in their second game as well, when the New York Rangers came to town. This was a goalie battle as Shesterkin took on Wolf in this one, and Uyghur had 3 assists, pretty impressive, and Shesterkin made 46 saves for New York. Really, I thought a much better game in this one for the Flames. What was your thought?
Well, other than the 30 seconds that the Rangers capitalized twice, I thought that the Flames were fairly dominant throughout this contest. It was actually nice to see that, the Rangers are one of the best road teams in the NHL. And frankly, I thought the Flames, as soon as the puck dropped, they were all over New York. They ended up out shooting them 20-5 in the first period. And, even with the Rangers tying it late in the second period, Calgary didn't let off the gas at all, and it took a shot from Connor Zary halfway through the third period to break the the tie game. But it's one of those where I think this was the best single effort by this team all season.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I think it's definitely a great effort from this team. Like you said, New York, a really good team, especially on the road. And, I wasn't sure what to expect going into this. I thought they'd win. I didn't expect them to look as dominant as they did. I thought it might be a bad bounce here or there that cost one team the game or the other. But I think it worked really well. And I think that the Flames looked like, a team, as you mentioned, that should be in the top 5 if you look at that game by itself. A great effort. Everybody contributed. When's the last time we saw the Flames outshoot a team so handily as well? It was 49-29 for shots. Like, the Flames were just all over them.
Yeah, and realistically, heading up to this point in the schedule, I had the Rangers game and the Wild game kind of circled after the first couple of weeks because of the fact that those were two of the elite teams in the NHL. And I thought the Flames not only did they win both, but I thought that they handled the other team rather effectively in both contests. And, it's nice to see because their hard work is starting to get rewarded, which has been trying for them. And they have not really scored a ton of goals in the first and second periods of games. And, they were able to get a couple in the Rangers game, one in the first, one in the second. They were able to get a power play goal. They actually managed to get 4 power play goals in total in the 3 games, which that's a rather large departure from how the season has gone. So it's nice to see that certain things are starting to turn the corner.
Yeah. The Calgary Flames took on another tough team in the Minnesota Wild on Saturday. This is the matinee afternoon game that we weren't sure how it would end up. Calgary Flames end up with a 4-3 shootout win. They get shootout goal from Kirkland and then the winner from Anderson. I thought I was at this one. I thought it was a really good game. There wasn't a ton of scoring, obviously, and the scoring all happened late pretty much. But I thought a very methodical game for these two. And the guy who stood next to me said they were doing whatever 90s retro night. I forget what they called it. And he said, remember when this team used to play the trap all the time? It's almost like they went back to that. Just kind of a boring defensive game from Minnesota. But, it was good to see the Flames, just like New York, were all over these guys, I thought. They played their game. They didn't get off their game. There were some issues, like the Flames only had 35% of the faceoff wins. But overall, I really liked the 60 minutes the Flames put in.
Yeah, and Calgary, even though they gave up the 2 late goals to allow the Wild to tie the game, they didn't stop there. And in past, if the other team came back to tie, usually they finished it off in overtime. And, Calgary would rarely get the game to a shootout. And I felt that they were able to settle the game back down and, play relatively okay in the overtime and then finish the game off properly in the shootout.
Yeah, and even after the Brock Faber goal, it still looked like to me Calgary had the edge here. I was not expecting that late Marco Rossi goal that tied it up. I was pretty sure the Flames were going to end this one in regulation.
Yeah.
So, but like you were saying, right? Good teams that the Flames haven't seen a lot of. They still have a lot of games against good teams coming up. But these two really good teams and a good test of the Flames. And they showed better than I thought they would in both scenarios.
Yes. The fact that they went 4 for 4 on the homestand, especially considering the quality of their opponents, to me is a minor miracle for perception of each of the teams. Nashville, after stocking up, they should be good. And the Islanders have been a playoff team. The Rangers were the President's Trophy winners last year, and Minnesota's in the top 2. in the NHL.
And even before that, I mean, they had that quick 1-game departure to Vancouver, but then they beat LA the night before, so they've really won 5 of their last 5 home games.
Yes.
And LA, a pretty good team, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, the Calgary Flames have now played 21 games. That's a quarter of the season done. They have 27 points, which puts them second in the Pacific Division. Vegas 28, Calgary 27, LA 25, and then Edmonton 24, Vancouver 23 for the top 5 spots here. You know, like you said, no one expected the Flames to hold that top spot in the Pacific for the few hours they did. I don't think even if you would have told me that they would be second in the Pacific at, the quarter point, I would have believed you going into this season.
No, realistically, I think everybody kind of had the Flames pegged right around where Seattle and Anaheim are, with 21 and 19 points respectively, and kind of in the bottom 10-ish of the league. And pure will, guts, and determination have pushed them all the way up into a prime spot in the playoffs, really. And the ridiculous thing is that if the playoffs started today, the Flames would actually be having home ice advantage in the first round.
Yeah.
Which it's what?
Yep.
Everybody's kind of penciling this team to be a bottom 5, bottom 10 team. And yet, looking at their roster, that's not entirely unfounded. The leading forward point scorer is on pace for 43 points. So it's not like the Flames are exactly scoring their way out of problems. They are having major issues with generating offense. The story of the year, frankly, is the play of Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar to a lesser extent.
Well, let's talk about those. So we're a quarter of the way through the season, 21 games into the 82, and I think we've had a good sampling of this team now. I mean, I never want to talk about where we're at in the whole season. 5 games, 10 games into the season, you need that time. And U.S. Thanksgiving is often kind of seen as that, indicator of where teams are at, and we're quickly coming up on U.S. Thanksgiving. So, Matt, like you said, when you look at this roster was not assembled to be as good as it is, right? This roster was designed as a rebuilding roster. And yeah, it's got some veterans on it. Yeah, it's got some young guys on it, but it's not designed to be a top 2 roster. So you mentioned one of the challenges there is scoring. And even coming into this season, right, Huska said scoring is going to be a challenge. We're not sure we're going to find it. We're all going to need to work together on that. Do you see anybody really breaking out and being that, kind of takeaway scoring leader? Do you still think it's going to be a committee if they want to get this done?
I think it is going to be a committee, and you're starting to see signs of life from a lot of the players. Pospisil, ever since he got moved to the wing, has been the Pospisil that we've known from last season. And he scored his first goal of the year last game against the Wild, and has been noticeable every game since he's been on the wing. Kuzmenko is starting to make plays and seem like himself. Sharangovich is starting to score. Guys are coming around, and there are certain players that are still struggling. Huberdeau's still a little struggling. Kadri's a little struggling. Coleman's not been very good. But the fourth line has, consistently every shift giving the team a boost every time they're out there, and kind of keeping all the other lines, on notice of this is the kind of the momentum that you guys need to actually participate at if you want to be in the lineup. So, and in a lot of ways, I think the Kirkland, Rooney, and Lomberg line has driven the Flames to this point of the season, which I think anybody would have been going, huh? What?
If I were to tell you coming into the season that at the quarter point, the Calgary Flames would be number 2 in their division, and Jonathan Huberdeau would be the leading forward goal scorer tied with Kadri, I think you'd think I was crazy. You'd probably throw me off the show.
Less so. Because Huberdeau did score 30 a couple of years ago with Florida, so that's not entirely.
But that's a very different Huberdeau than we've seen wearing red.
True, and thankfully he is shooting more instead of just passing all the time, so that's a good thing, and he's getting rewarded for it. Also got hit in front of the net the other day and trying to tip a empty net shot. You know, such as it is. At least he's going to the right places.
So, Matt, what players have impressed you so far in the first quarter?
Kevin Ball, Braden Pahal, Rasmus Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar, Tyson Berry.
Well, let's break some of these down. Hold on. So, why Ball?
He has been an amazing shutdown defenseman and is really emerged into a high quality defensive shutdown guy. And he's actually looking like a future top pairing defenseman in my books as the shutdown guy, like a Robin Regeer type.
We weren't sure what to expect when he was brought over in the Markstrom trade, but he's looked good so far. I think, Craig Connor is really showing that he has a pulse on good young talent in this league.
Yes, and like the fact that Ball has basically not only replaced what Chris Tanev was for this team, but also is actually significantly better on the offensive side of the game and is both taller and faster than Tanev was. Like, we got a significant upgrade in that generic role of the top 4 shutdown guy. And Ball is only 24, and he is just learning now how to engage physically, and you're actually starting to see him actually hit people, which was one of the complaints about him when he was with New Jersey, that he would frankly shy away from any contact more so than engage. And he's really growing as a player and even showing some offensive chops by jumping into plays from time to time, which was not really on his docket for things that he did before he got here. So the flexibility of his game is a huge boon for this franchise. And, I think that he will be one of the mainstays for the next decade on this team.
When I look at the back end for the Flames, the 6 kind of regulars, or even all 8 of them, I think he's the one that's impressed me the most. Tyson Berry's looked good, but I think we knew what to expect from Berry. I think Ball's probably the one that came in with the most uncertainty that we've seen. I guess we've been really impressed by. I want to throw Braden Pahal in there too. I thought Pahal would come in maybe as the number 7, and I think he's worked his way into a top 6 spot.
Yeah, arguably, he is not far off of what, I would have expected Ball to be heading into this season. And, he's really cemented himself as a highly effective shutdown defenseman in his own right. And, he's elevated his game to the point where, he might eventually be a top 4 shutdown defenseman himself, in addition to Ball's, and
right now Pahal's playing on the
good.
third pair with different partners, Hanley and a few other guys. I could see it, sometime after Christmas, swapping him and Mirmanov and putting Pahal up with a Weegar, just see if he can do it.
Yes, I agree. And, it's one of those things that defensemen tend to develop between the age of 24 and 27, and he's in that age group, and was kind of buried on Vegas, and the Flames gave him an opportunity, and he is running with it, and he's showing flashes of good two-way play in addition to effectively shutting down a lot of teams, because usually the third pairing is the defense pairing that you kind of feast on as opposing forward, and yet it's hard enough for any team to get any offense going against either the Weegar or Anderson pairings. You get to the Pahal pairing thinking, oh, finally we have a shot. And they're doing just as good as the other two.
Yeah.
At shutting down other teams. Not generating offense to the same clip, but definitely on the, stopping the other teams.
The Flames kept 8 defensemen on the roster, still have 8 defensemen on the roster. Are they not knowing who is going to be that bottom pair? They gave themselves some flexibility there, and I think we've really seen Pahal rise to that occasion, and I still think the best bottom pair is probably Pahal and Berry. But I really expected Bean to be there, and I think that Bahal has kind of pushed his way above Bean.
Oh, for sure. And it's one of those where, like as you said, like it is Pahal even pushing himself past Miromanov, and Miromanov has not been bad in his own right. So it's one of those where, like, the Flames.
I don't think Miromanov's been bad at all, but I think Pahal might have more upside.
Yes, it's one of those things that, like, what everybody assumed would be like the Flames' biggest weakness is turning out to actually be their biggest strength, the blue line. Because, like, as much as, like, Wolf and Vladar have played well, if you don't have a blue line that's keeping players out of their face and, limiting the other team, like, the goalie can stand on his head, but he can't do it all himself.
Yeah.
And, like, the blue line arguably has been significantly better this season than it was a year ago.
I think we can both agree it's not a deep playoff blue line, but it's working for what they need.
Yes, for sure. And, like, of course, like, they could use, like, another legit scoring defenseman and, another, big name guy. But, for what it is and where the Flames are at, like, this is top tier from all of them. Like, I can't really slag any of the defensemen, even the fill-in guys, whether it's Bean, Barry, or Hanley.
I mean, like, Hanley's played 3 games, and he's looked good enough in all 3 games.
Yeah, like, serviceable NHL players, all 3 of them. So, you're kind of like, okay. Like, this was not expected. Like, we were kind of hoping that, like, Ball, Uyghur, and Anderson would be good enough to cover half of the lineup, and then, hope that somebody figures out the other 3
but this
spots.
Is, as a rebuilding team, this is what we need, right? We need young guys to take that step.
Yes, and, the fact that, like, all of those guys have stepped up and, like, not only become, high-quality players, but, like, actually earning the spots that they're getting and, like, pushing up the lineup, like, that's phenomenal for where the Flames are at, especially when you look behind them and you see guys like Grushnikov, Brustevich, Poirier, Perek, all, and others even more so than those guys that are all, coming through in the not too distant future. Like, the Flames all of a sudden are insanely deep on the blue line, and it's, other than the tandem of Wolf and Vladar, like, I think that's the biggest organizational strength right now is their blue line.
Any blue liners that have disappointed for you?
Not one.
Me neither.
Like, even
Let's
Jake
move to the
Bean,
forward.
yeah, like, even Jake Bean, who, in my opinion, has been the least good of the younger guys that have come in, he is still a passable 5'6". Like,
Jake Bean is what Jake Bean is. I mean, yeah, he came in. I think he's been a 5'6" in the league for a few years. We were maybe hoping there was something more there. I don't think there is now, but, he's good for what they need him to be.
Yeah. Good 5, 6, 7, 8, and yeah.
Who's impressed you on the forward side?
Ryan Lomberg, Justin Kirkland, and Kevin Rooney.
That whole fourth line.
And recently Coronado.
Okay. Let's start with Coronado, because I think there's a story there. I mean, there's a guy who couldn't stay in the NHL last year, and I would say since he's come back full time is looking like a big contributor, right? You and I talked about how you couldn't bring Coronado back and put him on the fourth line. He had to come back and play top 6 if he's going to come back, because that's who he is. And he's come back. I mean, he's on a line with Backlund and Sharon Govich, and he's been the difference in a few games. He's been scoring goals. He's been scoring game-winning goals. Like, he looks like he's turned his game around. And he's ready to be in the NHL.
Yeah, to the point where, in my book, he is the most dangerous scoring threat from the Flames currently. Yeah, out of all of the forwards. And the thing that irked me over the last year and a half watching him at the NHL level was that he was not being assertive in playing the game his way. And he is very good, like when he was in the AHL, of getting to those right spots to utilize his skill set, which is to fire that puck hard into the top corner. And you just did not see that for like the first year and a bit from him. And then something clicked where he was actually getting himself into those scoring positions, and his shots, speaking for him at this point. And like that goal that he scored the other day, like, was a highlight reel caliber snapshot, like tutorial on how to effectively use the defender as a screen and pick the corner on a goalie. Like, that is not a goal that you would have seen from him at the beginning of this year or at any point last year in the NHL, but was a regular feature in the AHL.
The biggest change I think I've seen with him is he seems more confident now. I think maybe being in a top 6 role to not have to play that, or even a top 6 forward role, of not having to play that sort of bottom 6 style, which I don't think he does well. And I think he's improved his game away from the puck. Like, when he first came up, I thought he was okay when he had the puck, but sometimes even a liability when he didn't. And I think he's really got himself as a good all-around winger now.
Yeah, and as long as he's effective enough defensively where it's not like what is this guy doing on the ice, his offensive game is high-end enough where, that will more than compensate for any defensive deficiencies. But, he still needs to get better at all aspects of the game, but the amount of steps he has taken, it's very much reminding me of our conversation about Hanzig, about the Penticton tournament, and then in the preseason, where, still some way to go, but like, wow, this is a turnaround.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Kirkland, you mentioned him. I mean, what a story, right? A guy who I think Craig Conroy re-signed. Craig Conroy used to be the GM for the AHL team for the Flames, and I think that's where he knew Kirkland from, because Kirkland had a stint here in the past. He was with the Stockton Heat from 2019 through 2022. When he got called up, I was expecting this to be a quick filler body. I did not expect him to become what he's become for the Flames.
Yeah, like I read online somebody saying that, like if you had told me at the quarter point of this season that the shootout hopes, hang on Justin Kirkland, the question you'd be asking is how many players have the Flames traded?
Yeah.
and he has just come in and quietly been very effective every game. I think he's had 2 or 3 games in total since he's been recalled where he's just been there. The rest of the time, like, he and Lomberg are kind of just running the other team around quite frequently during their time on the ice. And then once he gets to the shootout, he's Mr. Automatic, it seems.
Yeah, and I mean, just, even outside the shootout, I can't think of a time that I haven't liked his game. Like, he knows his role. This is the exact maybe epitome of what we talk about, to bring in a guy for the role that they're going to be in. Kirkland is a bottom 6 forward, right? I think Kirkland is a fourth line centerman. That's where he is in this lineup, and he's come in there and he's embraced that. Well, you're not going to try him on, line 1 or line 2. That's not what he is. He knows this role and he fits this role well, and I think he's made the team for the rest of the year.
Oh, I agree. Like, barring like his game completely falling off, which we have not seen through, like normally, like there's a bounce of about 8 to 10 games where a guy might, excel more than anticipated, and then the guy falls off. It's been too long with him in the lineup. Like, he's been here pretty much since day one, and like he's as effective in game 21 as he was in game 3. And it's one of those things that it's a good feel-good story, and you just hope that he keeps it up. And if he can actually continue to play effectively as a fourth line player, he could end up having a lengthy NHL career, especially having the ringer shootout move. Like, if you have a passable NHL guy that you can actually stick in the lineup and not hurt you and be Mr. Automatic in the, like, 1 out of every 8 games that goes to a shootout, like, that's a big deal for a lot of teams.
And not just a regular NHL career. I think the Flames would keep him around here as long as they could.
Yes, I agree.
And, if we look at him, he's played 18 games, way more, probably 17 more than I thought he'd probably play when he got called up. And he's got 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points in 18 games. For a guy of that caliber, doing really well.
Yeah, like when you're on pace for over 30 points over the course of a season and
Playing on
you're
your
a fourth liner, come on, like that's basically God mode fourth liner level of production. Like that's good third liner production. And then to be automatic in the shootouts too. Like there's not much more you can ask from him. And I think, to be honest, he has benefited a ton from having Ryan Lomberg on his line, because it's hard to, kind of take a shift off if the guy beside you is being a wrecking ball. And so, it kind of spurns you on too, because, well, hey, that guy's doing it, let me too. And, they've been really bouncing well off of each other. The whole fourth line has been, frankly. Kevin Rooney has fit well as well. And, I think that they're kind of making each other better than perhaps any of them are, because their chemistry is just right now off the rails, and their work ethic has been fantastic.
Yeah, and Kevin Rooney too, we have to give credit to him. When he first got here, he played 17 games with the Flames in 2022-2023 and then got sent to the Wranglers, where he played 51 games. And, even the next season, 23-24, 4 games with the Wranglers. Like, it seems, he's had a bit of a road to get himself to being an NHL full-time guy. And, again, do I think he's got that role because of where the Flames are? For sure. But he didn't just come in and get handed that role. He's worked for it, which you've got to give him that credit for.
Yeah, like the Flames do have a bunch of other options that, in the Wranglers system that, they could throw Klapka up there, or Hunt, or, Peltier, or. And the fact that Rooney still has that job is a testament to how effective he has been.
I don't think he would get claimed on waivers if they did want to send him down.
Exactly.
And you mentioned Lomberg. I think there's part of Ryan Lomberg that we don't see on the ice. And we've heard the coach talk about this. If you've watched The Chase, the video series the Flames put out, you've seen some of it. Ryan Huska said that Lomberg has really become an extension of the coaching staff, and he's really become a leader on this team. And, he did win the Stanley Cup last year. He's one of the guys that has a ring on this team. I think that's the kind of guy you really need around here. And he's pumping guys up in the dressing room. He's keeping everyone honest. Like, I think there's a lot to Ryan Lomberg that we're not seeing that is really contributing towards the positive here.
Well, and that was one of my complaints about the Flames, in the last iteration, the Tkachuk, past, from basically Iginla to the end of the Gaudreau-Tkachuk era, that, there was not a ton of personality in the locker room. There was nobody to, kick his teammates in the butt to actually get going. And, when you see, the good teams that win the Stanley Cups, like Chicago, when they were really highly good, all of the players on the team would be kicking each other in the butt, trying to, anytime that they were down, to try and get them motivated to get going. And Lomberg is, him winning the Stanley Cup last year, he's a great facilitator for that, because his personality and his words on the ice on how he plays, everybody just has to look at him and see this short little guy going and, hammering other players, knocking them off the puck, stealing it and generating a scoring chance, and go, well, I'm not going to be able to just, skate lazily through the game without, feeling bad because, this guy can do it, why not me too? And, you're starting to see that rub off on the rest of the guys, where, everybody on the team is starting to play that good two-way game, and, engaging and checking, and, all the little intangibles that lead to, on ice results we're seeing from this group, where everybody is pulling in the same direction. And I think that, as strange as it sounds, the fourth line has been the catalyst for this team, which I do find mystifying, but because
you mentioned Chicago.
anytime,
and when I look at some of these good teams, I think that they always have depth, right?
Yes.
And that's what I think a lot of fans and even sometimes media people forget. Like, if we look at any good team, it's not always the star players, the sexy ones, the ones that everyone wants to talk about, but those star players often aren't winning you a Stanley Cup or going deep in the playoffs on their own, right? They need help. And I think that what we're seeing from the Flames is that they've got a whole bunch of guys who know and understand their role, which is awesome. That's what you want. And, these guys all know exactly what they have to do and how to play, and that's why the Flames are having success. It's not just the guys at the top.
No, and to quote Dan Vladar, like, the Flames are getting an identity of being hungry bastards. And, everybody is giving 100% every game, and you're seeing that. Like, we're wearing down teams to the point where we're able to score goals in the third period late to get the game to overtime or win it in regulation, and just, grind the other team into oblivion. And, like, the fact that the Flames are the second best team in the division right now is a testament to just how much everybody is pulling towards the same direction. Because based off of just talent alone, like, all the preseason prognostications of them being a bottom 5 team are accurate. And they're there through pure gumption and force of will. And
they're a hardworking team.
Yeah, it's phenomenal to see. Because, like, for the longest time, this team has not had an identity at all.
Yep.
And it's just been collection of insert miscellaneous parts here. And hopefully they'll be good enough to win games. And, like, for years, like we were saying, like, we need these guys to pull in the same direction. And it was kind of like everybody pulling in their own direction. Talent-wise, they had enough to be good, but, none of the things that actually make you successful. And, the team is doing things the right way right now.
I want to toss in one more name that's impressed me so far, and that's Huberdeau. A disappointment.
I agree.
A disappointment has come to Calgary. He started off really hot. He's the top forward point getter right now with 11 points. I mean, is he, going to get his 100 points again? No, we all know that. I think those years are behind him, and we have to admit that as, Flames fans, that we're not going to see that Huberdeau again. But I think he's settling into who he is, and I think he's settling into, finding his identity on this team and finding who he's going to be and becoming a contributor in different ways.
Yes, and you can see him doing a lot of the things that away from the puck as well that lead to team success, which he has become a far better defensive player than he had been either of the last 2 seasons. Yes, the point totals are obviously not there, but, again, you can say that about the entire Flames forward group. Like, the leading guy, which is Huberdeau, is on pace for 43 points. Like, it's not like there's a ton of guys that he's missing passes to. Like, everybody is not very good this year in terms of, their individual performance to today. So it'll be interesting to see how he and the rest of the team, like, as guys start to heat up, if, things start generating a little bit easier for everybody, instead of, like, winning games 2-1. But we'll have to see.
Has anybody disappointed you on the front end?
Respective to himself, I think Blake Coleman has not been very good. And I'm not counting, like, his 30 goals from last year, because I know
last year's the anomaly.
Yeah, like, he's a 15 to 20 goal, 35 to 40 point guy generally. But, like, even, like, on the defensive side of it, he hasn't been as sharp. Just a little bit of sloppiness generally. Not terrible by any stretch, but, it's one of those where, like, he has been a little bit concerning Not a ton, but
I would agree with you with Coleman. I don't think we've seen the two-way game that we need from him. I'm also going to add Nazem Kadri in there. I expected him to be more of an offensive dynamo this year. I expect him to, to really lead the team in that department, and he hasn't.
Well, and like his bounce back year last year, he was with Zari and Pospisil, and their chemistry made all three of them better, much like the Flames' current fourth line the chemistry is making them better. And he has virtually zero chemistry with Kuzmenko for whatever reason. You would think that two skill players being together, they would be able to figure it out through 20 games, but they're just not on the same page. And, it's hard to generate offense when two key scoring winger or players are not on the same page. And
at this point, I think I would swap Kuzmenko and Coleman and try a Postel Kadri Coleman line.
I agree. And I think that, for Kuzmenko's sake, I think he needs to get away from Kadri, and I think for Kadri's sake, he needs to get away from Kuzmenko, because for whatever reason, that pairing just does not work. And it's been a quarter of the season, and much like the Pospisil center experience, it just is not working, so try something new. And, if it doesn't work, okay, then shuffle it up again. But, just something needs to switch with those two guys, because I think they're just both bringing each other down more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Kadri has a lot to offer this team, and he's not getting to with the way that he's being utilized right now.
Well, and it's one of those where, you can see, Kadri by himself is doing most of the same things that he was doing last year when he was successful. Kuzmenko is doing a lot of the same things that he was doing to be successful away from the puck. It's just, for whatever reason, the fit between those two guys and their games does not communicate well, and their interactions with each other just seem to cause the plates to die. And we saw the power play goal for Pospisil, who Kadri is very familiar with. Kadri set him up for a perfect tap-in. Their chemistry is really good. And yet, Kuzmenko has been in that same spot on the power play off and on, and yet Kadri has not really been able to find Kuzmenko for whatever reason with a similar type play at any point this year.
Fair. Yep. Have your expectations of the Calgary Flames changed?
Not yet. I find that they will probably hit the wall at some point, because frankly, you cannot score that few goals and expect to, as good as Wolf and Vladar and the defense corps have been, unless they remain basically the best defense corps and the best goaltending tandem in the NHL all year, this team is going to drop off, and they do need help. And we're starting to see the power play come alive a little bit, which, we won those games. So if they can actually start generating some offense that isn't 5-on-5, this team could be sustainably good, but we haven't seen enough of that yet. As good as they have been, it's hard to play 82 games that way if you're only getting a goal or two every game. And, I do expect them to slide. I don't expect them to be a bottom 5 team anymore, mainly because, they'd have to be abysmal to get down to that level. But
there's a lot of teams in the West that are underperforming now. Do you think it's fair to say that if the Flames are not in the top 3 in their division, they're probably not going to get a wild card spot?
Probably.
I think it'll be both teams from the other division they'll get the wild card spot.
Yeah, because if you look at it, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas, and Colorado are all top tier teams.
Colorado is a top tier team when they have forwards available.
Yes. I think that might end up being 4-4, to be honest. because like Utah, St. Louis, and Nashville, like they need to show some life. Much like the Flames are doing well, they're on the opposite side of it where they're actually needing to show more. And until they do, I can't really count them necessarily in the playoff push yet. Because like they're all three of those teams are down with Anaheim and San Jose for being like the worst teams in the NHL. So like, you know, like they need to show a little bit of a pulse first before I can count them in. But I think that right now there are 4 teams in our division that will get in at this point, and there are 5 teams in that group. So with the Flames kind of being the weird, like, oh, you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
At this point. And could the Flames fall out? Yes. Like if they go on a 4-game losing streak, they'll be 5th. So, you know, like it's going to be tough for this team. Like as great as they've been, like they're only like 3 points up on a playoff spot. Like
for a development team, like a team that's in development and rebuilding, do you think that there's more harm or hurt in potentially running for the playoffs?
I would absolutely hate if this team used any assets whatsoever to add to this team.
I agree.
Like
I think if you don't do that, you're fine.
I would be extremely confused saying, what's the point?
Yeah. As long as they follow their plan and they use the same guys and the same plan they had, I think if this team can make the playoffs or get close, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Get these guys some experience of winning. But yeah. I totally agree with you. You can't go out and say, hey, we're close. We need to go and, you know, spend an asset to get a better player. That's gonna tank things.
And especially like this team as it is only where it is because of chemistry. Adding or subtracting somebody willy-nilly could easily be the thing that pushes the team off the cliff into where they should be, quote unquote. And you know, I think you just kind of have to run with the guys in the room. And, you know, like if the Flames are out of the playoff spot by the trade deadline, you do look at selling off the parts that you wanted to sell off in the first place and go from there. I do not think that you change any of the script for, you know, your plans heading into the season. Like the plan is still to sell any free agent at the deadline and
yep.
You know, if they're in the playoff spot, you might hold off on that, depending on exactly where we are. Like if we're comfortably in, I think you keep everybody, but like I certainly would not add to this group at all. They're the ones running the show, so have fun.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, again, like, you know, I've never been in tank mode. I've never been a fan of tanking, as a lot of fans are. I think if they can keep these guys and these guys can get themselves into the playoffs, great. Give them the chance to do that. Don't go and acquire assets, but if this core group can get there or get close, I think you've got to let them try it, and you want to breed that success, right? And that's what's going to bring more people. That's what's going to bring more players to this team in the future, knowing their success. Like, you know, I think that that's something that, yeah, if they can do it, great, but don't spend an asset to do it.
Well,
and with all the weird conditions on the first this year, I think it's also the least maybe dangerous year to, you know, think you're squandering the first if you do it.
Well, and also this year's draft, like outside of the top 5, is kind of bad. So it's not like if say we lost like the 16th overall pick, say like we're the last team to miss the playoffs, like that guy probably would have been the 25th overall pick last year. So it's not going to be quite the same level of impact if we do lose, like, say, the 15th or 16th pick, you know, as it, you know, the thought would be under normal circumstances. And plus having 2 first rounders anyway, whether it's Florida, New Jersey's, or our own, or whatever, like, we're going to get 2 good players out of that anyway.
Yeah, so, and even if they don't make those picks, even if we were to move one for next year or something like that, or, you know, like, I think, like you said, the draft doesn't look all that spectacular outside of the top 5 this year anyways. We're not going to be in the top 5, so you're not hurting yourself if you're drafting 18th instead of 12th.
Exactly. And realistically, like, to rebuild a franchise, the main goal is to set yourself up an identity and get young pieces and players that fit that identity and build onto it, and then add more pieces as you move along. Well, the Flames have finally established an identity of being a hardworking team, and like you're getting guys like Ball, like Lomberg, Pahal, that are, Grushnikov, that like have a reputation for being that hardworking, dedicated type of guy. So like even though like the Flames might not necessarily be bad, they are rebuilding in the right way and getting parts that they need. And you're seeing guys like Zari and Coronado establish themselves as legit NHL top 6 forwards, which is a good thing. And then you can supplement that in future drafts or with guys like they just drafted, like Basha and Battaglia and Gradine and, so on and so on. And, like it's not an easy process. And like usually the teams that frankly suck at rebuilding, they throw everything out and then just assume that they'll draft all the parts that they need to get themselves out of it. You need the identity first. And like the fact that the Flames are becoming a hardworking team and are focusing on that as a core tenet of, with all of their player acquisitions, because like you look at all the prospects they got, that's a very similar theme with everybody.
And not just the prospects. Like I think part of the reason they're successful is they blended veterans and prospects really well. There's a lot of confusion when they brought in a guy like Mantha, but I think part of the reason they're doing well is they have the veterans to lead.
Yes. And, you look at a guy like Andrew Basha, for example, like he would fit in with Lomberg today, on that fourth line of being that feisty firebrand type winger. And, it's good for this team as they transition into the next era of this team, that they're finding the right way of building this team. And like you look at the teams that are always successful, what's the number one thing they all have? They work their ass off. All of them.
Yep.
The Flames for the last 20 plus years, except for 03-04, never really worked their ass off.
True.
And, that's why like the expected results based on their talent level and the actual results were always leaving a lot to be desired generally. And, like this team is learning the right way to play. This is how you need to actually win a Stanley Cup. It's not easy. You have to go out and be a wrecking ball every game. And, the other team, if they want to win, they got to earn every scrap of that ice. And, like, this team is learning that and doing very well at it.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, I think if they can, you need to reward these guys. If they can earn it, you got to reward them with, a playoff run or at least getting close and learning, okay, why did we fall short? Like, I think the thing that we forget when teams are rebuilding a lot of times, especially fans, is, yeah, it's great to get that top pick, but eventually you need to be able to win and you need to train winning. Winning is something you need to learn. And I think the more you have that culture, it's going to help with some of those young names you brought up. But also, like I was saying, I think, when we look at veterans, right? I think part of the reason the Flames did so well is they're not afraid to put veterans in their lineup. And I really think that if you're looking in the offseason and you're saying, okay, we need another veteran to come in, like that's going to help so much to say, oh yeah, I want to be part of that. They have a winning culture.
Yeah, because like anybody looking at the Flames sees that like, oh, hey, they have this boatload of prospects coming up. They have effective young NHL players. They have a star young goaltender. I want to get in on the ground floor of that and, join them to be that cup winning team because like they're looking like they're building the foundation correctly, which, yay.
And even if it's a guy like Mantha who just needs somewhere to land for a year to try and turn himself around, I mean, you're probably more likely to join the Flames because a winning culture means you're probably going to look better and increase your value. So whether it's a long-term acquisition or a short-term acquisition, I think that just, having that culture is going to help these guys.
Oh, for sure. And the Flames, I think, are showing themselves well enough where they can kind of pick and choose free agents to target, not just, hey, we need a body here. Because, we need to fill a roster spot, and, anybody willing to sign here is A-okay in our books.
Yeah.
Like, you can kind of tailor it. Like, we need this specific type of player. We either get it through trade or free agency, and, go from there. And it's a great position for this team to be in over the long term, because teams with identity, like, you always see free agents and players just in general wanting to go to those teams, because you have a certain mindset when you're that kind of team. So anything that you contribute, generally, like, it's matching energies, so to speak. Like, if you're that type of guy, you'd want to go to that type of team because you'll mesh well. And it just benefits the teams because they're not a wishy-washy collection of players. Like, it seems like they're really they're really fitting. We play this way, you play this way, we're good. And let's go. And it's just, I give Conroy a 10 out of 10 to this point. Like, he has done a picture perfect job transforming what I assumed was going to be like a 5-year in the wilderness to maybe less, because of the fact that he's done the foundation work, which is generally the hard part. Getting the goaltending and the defense set up properly is always the hardest, and lo and behold, well, hey, guess what? Like, mission accomplished on both fronts.
And I think also, to be fair, credit to ownership, who it's been said for a long time here, there's been hesitancy to do a rebuild, right? And so I think credit to ownership for allowing him to do that.
Oh, yeah. And, to be honest, like, going to games this year, the game is a lot more interesting watching this team this year than it was last year. Yeah. And because you see everybody caring about, not even like their own game, but like how their game's impacting their line mates and like the team as a whole.
It's a team.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but when was the last time you remember having a really hardworking team backed by a phenomenal goalie for this team?
I vaguely recall, watching something like that. It's been about 21 years, but yeah.
I don't want to say that that's who these guys are, but this is very much what it reminds me of, is that 04 team.
Yes, exactly. Like, you had a hodgepodge of miscellaneous players, and one hell of a goalie, and they had fun.
Yeah.
And to speak on the goalie, Wolf, honestly, like, right now, like, if the season ended today, I think he actually would not only get votes for the Vezina, but also potentially the Hart Trophy. Not winning it by any means, but like, he would be on the list of people getting votes, I think, for both. Because, like, he has been...
fans who don't remember, what is the Hart Trophy?
The league MVP and the goalie of the year. And, like, to be honest, like, he has been, if not the best goalie, one of the 3 best goalies in the entire NHL this year. And, like, the Flames, if they didn't have him, like... and credit to Vladar, he has been excellent as well, but Wolf has been on a whole different planet, and this is the guy we saw in the AHL the last couple seasons, and he won the league MVP there, and it's he's not showing any different in terms of his caliber of play on the ice, and it's just nice to see, and it's a treat to watch him play because he's absolutely phenomenal to this point.
Matt, I think we've talked about everything there is to talk about for this week. Should we look ahead to the week that's coming?
Yes.
Neither of us did well in our predictions last week. Last week, I'd predicted...
I think you and I are both upset about that.
I predicted they'd win the New York games and lose Minnesota. So, yeah, I'm happy that they won all 3. You thought they'd beat the Islanders and lose the other 2, and, of course, they win all 3.
Yep.
This week, the Flames go on the road. They have a week of road games, 4-game road trip, all in 1 week, and all early games for Flames fans. So Monday the 25th, the 5:30 p.m. Calgary start time. That'll be our second Amazon Prime game of the year. So if your parents call you and you know how to watch the game, you can get them going on that one. Then on the 27th, 5:30 p.m. again against the Detroit Red Wings in Detroit. And then they have a back-to-back on the 29th and 30th. Friday the 29th is 1 p.m. start in Calgary. That's the Thanksgiving game. And then on the 30th, a 5 p.m. start against the Penguins. What do you think for this one?
I think that they will win 2 of the 4 games.
Which 2?
The first one and the last one.
So you think that they're going to win the
Pittsburgh and Ottawa game.
Ottawa and Pittsburgh?
And lose Detroit and Columbus. For whatever reason, we always suck in Columbus, and it makes 0 sense. So, yeah, I will just keep that tradition alive of us losing the game in Columbus.
You know, I think the game in Calgary against Columbus is going to be difficult because there's going to be some sort of pregame ceremony for Johnny. They haven't announced what yet. I don't think you're going to get those emotions when we go there because I think that they've already kind of had their piece with Johnny and, you know, putting his number in the rafters and all that. Yeah. I think it could be an emotional game for a few of the guys, though, especially if Meredith is there. Guys that played with him like Coleman and Backlund who might be maybe a little bit off. Also, a 1 p.m. start. I mean, that's a weird start for these guys. And we even heard, you know, Vladar say after the Minnesota game that's a weird start. So, you know, you get a ton of rest even for the next day because you're not playing late. But, yeah, I think that Columbus game is going to be a loss. I don't know what to make of the rest. Like, back-to-back, it's always tough to predict a back-to-back.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Pittsburgh has been absolutely terrible this season. So, you know, like if you're going to pick the second night of a back-to-back, that's pretty much the team you want is, you know, because like they are just all sorts of awful this year.
I'm going to say the Flames continue their win streak. They're going to beat Ottawa, Detroit, and Pittsburgh, and they're going to lose to Columbus.
Okay.
That's going to be my pick. I think that they've got a lot of momentum now. I mean, they've won their last 4.
Well, and to be honest, like all of the games this week are against some really poor teams. Like Ottawa has 17 points, Detroit has 18, Pittsburgh has 18, and Columbus is at 20. You know, like all 4 of those teams would be well outside the playoffs in the West, and like they're amongst the worst teams in the NHL. So, in terms of quality of competition, like this could be a lengthy winning streak for the Flames if they keep their effort level up. But I think that's going to be the hard thing. From what we've seen from Flames fans of yesteryear, is they tend to play to their opponents, and as long as they can play the game we saw this week, I think they can get those 3 wins. If they start playing like their opponents, I don't think they will. Yeah, and, you know, them getting up for both the Rangers and the Wild, it's hard to then go to Ottawa and then, you know, Detroit and then Pittsburgh and Columbus. Like, it's not the same, you know, like the quality of the opponent. Like so it'll be interesting to see how this team fares.
Who do you play when? For goalies?
Wolf, Vladar, Wolf.
I really think if you think Wolf is a starter, my issue is he really hasn't had a starter schedule yet. And I think this might be the week to get him a starter schedule. Play him in 3 of the 4 and see how he does.
Yeah, because I'm figuring the day game with Columbus, you give that one to Vladar.
Vladar's becoming their matinee man.
Yeah, well, why not? And that way Wolf's, you know, because like Wolf's not played since Thursday. So, you know, that's the whole weekend for him. So playing on Monday and then Wednesday is no big deal. And then again on Saturday, again, no big deal. So, yeah, I think 3 out of the 4 for Wolf and, you know, see how it fares. And, you know, you can swap things up tentatively, like if Wolf has a really bad game in one of them, but might as well kind of.
But even if Wolf has a bad game, I think, especially when it's against the East and you're not giving up points teams behind you, I think there's something to be said that if you think this guy's going to be a starter, see how he bounces back.
Sure.
Right? Like, this is my biggest issue right now with the goaltending. It's been great, don't get me wrong, but that's part of being a starter. And I think we need to give Wolf the chance to work through some of those things the starter would be working through.
I agree. And, it's one of those where, like, there's no time like the present. And Calgary is at a part of their schedule where, a lot, as you said, like, they're in the East, let it rip. And, if he plays poorly, he can bounce back against the next poor team from the East that they're playing against, and
or not, and adversity, and learn from the adversity.
Exactly. It's kind of a win-win situation.
But I think you need to, at some point, stop the every other and start saying, this is our guy, we're going to give him a bit of a run.
Yeah, like 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, and see how it goes. And, Vladar is used to coming in like every third game and playing well. And, how do you say, over the next like month or two, I'd kind of like to see Wolf get Markstrom's starts, so to speak, where, like he would be playing 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. Give him a bit of a workload, because like he was used to that in the AHL. And can your level of play remain elite for that duration, and learn from it? Because frankly, at some point, like, he is going to be a 50+ game starter. Whether it's this year or next year, like it's going to happen. So, the sooner he can learn at that level, then why not?
I agree. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it next week. And Matt, as always, it's exciting to see where the Flames are at. I will talk to you after this road trip.
And as always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.